everybody. Thanks for coming. I appreciate it. For those of you not wearing your shoes, I applaud you. Specifically because we got yelled at for it last night. So, a little inside joke there. But yeah, I'm Jon Milkens, also known as Caveman, with my wonderful crew. So a little bit about me. I'm currently working as a pen tester and red teamer. Was on the Mandiant Red team for a few years. Before that, I was in the Army for quite some time and with Center for Internet Security, where most people are familiar with their secure benchmarks and not really anything else. But they have, a lot of other stuff going on. Avid role-playing game player, primarily D&D. And then I brew a bunch of hard cider every year because I live in Vermont, so tons of apples. And then we also just started brewing or distilling brandy as well as a fun hobby. So we're going to talk about Hashcat today. Nothing really novel here, but nothing really is in the pen testing world. It's really just creating efficient processes to help you get the job done faster, because typically you are on a time-boxed assessment. So really narrowing your scope is what you want to do. So what is Hashcat, right? It's open source software, open source, right? They have a huge development team, in contact with them very frequently. I'm sure they hate me by now. And it does actually go through rigorous code reviews before every Hashcat release is made public. But if you want the bleeding edge, just pull it off the repo, do the code review yourself. There are some networking functions that you can take a look at. Doesn't technically need them to operate, so it's on you to remove those if you wish. It supports over 500 hashing algorithms. It doesn't support everything. And primarily why most people switched to Hashcat was they were one of the first to support GPU cracking. It really revolutionized the cracking game. Primarily before that, people were hoarding rainbow tables, which are absolutely insanely large. Just to give you an idea, an 8-character rainbow table for an NTLM hash set is approximately 1 terabyte. So as you add an additional character for that, it increases exponentially, and nobody has the money or the place to actually store this. Cloud costs are through the roof. Don't know if you have a bunch of cloud assets, but it is not cheap. And the real good thing about Hashcat that we've been seeing and I've been using a lot lately is they have so many different attack modes, right? Not just the hash modes, but you can combine these modes and come up with unique guesses that you otherwise wouldn't have with something as simple as a dictionary and a rule set, which is the most common cracking method outside of brute forcing. John the Ripper was once our favorite, but yeah, it's a CPU cracker. Yes, they do support GPUs. It's kind of finicky, but it did take forever to crack hashes. So we all moved to Hashcat, and got to have the obligatory meme here, but this was literally the pen test community as soon as Hashcat came out and really started taking off. So, just pretty funny. But an 8-character brute force on John the Ripper is going to take quite a long time using just CPU. For instance, our 8 GPU rig does an 8-character NTLM crack in about 8 hours, just shy of 8 hours. And that's on some old cards that we need to upgrade, and still not in the budget yet, but we're working on it. So I dubbed this the Pen Tester Pack. These are primarily what we see on a day-to-day basis when doing most of our pen testing. It's going to cover your NTLMs, all your Kerberos hashes, so Kerberosting, AS rep roasting. You've probably heard those terms before. They came out in like 2013, 2014. Still viable methods for getting domain admin in corporate networks. Was doing a test for a client recently. Cracked a DA Kerberos who used the password password1. Yeah, no, it was a DA. They didn't split the DA account. It was his normal user account, mailbox, the whole nine. So yeah, 0 to DA in probably an hour for that test. You know, most of the time I would say we're DA within 30 minutes of coming in. So pretty interesting. You got your net NTLM hashes here. Those are associated with tools like Responder or Inveigh, man in the middle 6, that's capturing that network authentication material. Good way to get it. Cached credentials, those are extremely slow to crack due to the number of rounds associated, as well as it salts with the username. So all the hashes are unique in a way, and it's just slow, but can be done. I have gotten DA that way. It's just slow and painful. MS SQL hashes, MySQL hashes, WordPress, Joomla, and then SHA-1's MD5. You'll typically find those associated with your internal web apps and things like that, or external. They have support for tons of other things. If you've ever done any sort of CTF or any certification, you can crack zips, you can crack docs, right? You're going to need Jon the Ripper to create hashes for those, or you can do it yourself. I don't suggest that. It sucks. Just go ahead and use the wonderful tools from the Jon the Ripper crew. But yeah, then things like IPMI, IPsec, IKE aggressive mode, things like that. You'll come across them, but this is primarily what you're going to see on an internal network, a little bit on the external side. So you might not know what these hashes look like. Hashcat gives you this wonderful page. I probably use it multiple times a day. It's their example hashes page. So if you don't know what your hash mode is, it can try to figure it out for you. Some hashes, it'll, like MD5s, NTLMs, they're all 32 characters. They're all hex characters, so it doesn't know which one it is. Kind of got to know where you got your hashes from. But if you don't know how a hash is formatted, this is a great resource because some tools do not output your hashes correctly, and you will have to troubleshoot it because you will get that terrible separator unmatched error, and then you have to sit there and troubleshoot. Okay, well, what's wrong? And this is a great resource for that, especially for like Wi-Fi hashes, sometimes Kerberos hashes, because some tools do screw up that output, especially when you're going through a C2 that is splitting the output and you're rebuilding it yourself. So highly recommend looking at this page. It is an invaluable resource that I stare at frequently, even though I do this day in, day out and just play with our cracker at work all the time. If this thing would change slides, we'd be good to go. So here we got the Hashcat attack modes. There's 6 main attack modes. You got straight or dictionary mode. This is your default mode. So you don't need to specify it. It's specified by default. But being good stewards, you want to know what you're running. And if people come across it, just give it the A0 just for brevity and verbosity. Combination mode is where you take 2 dictionaries, append the guesses together to create new words. Brute force is exactly how it sounds, trying character by character until you find whatever. Very slow. Once you get over 8 characters, that becomes extremely slow. Hybrid is actually my favorite to use. This is really great because you can combine a mask, so what you're going to use with those brute forces, you can go ahead and combine those with a word list, right? So A6 is an append, so you can append a mask to the end of every guess. A7 is a prepend, so it puts it at the beginning. Really great for creating a bunch of different combinations. The creator of Hashcat, Adam, these are his favorite. He did a whole talk on the use of these and why they work so well in corporate environments. Most of the time we know just through how humans are. We know, oh, we need an upper, we need a lower, we need a number, we need a symbol. Okay, well, what's easiest for us to remember is, okay, typically let's just put a upper at the beginning of our password because it's like a sentence. Boom, there it is, there's our upper. We got a bunch of lowercase letters because we're writing a word, we're writing our daughter's name, we're writing our dog's name, we're writing a season, a month, whatever. Throw in the current year or your favorite number and then hit it with like an exclamation point at the end, right? Or typically an exclamation point, an @ symbol, or a hash or a dollar sign in most cases, right? Because we're all lazy. It's just human nature to be lazy, right? You think, I'm going to create the best password. No, you're going to be lazy. You're going to follow a pattern, and those patterns are recognizable, especially with enough data. So when you see a lot of these passwords and you can run analytical models across them. I don't do that. I'm lazy. Like I just said, humans are lazy. But every time I crack, I look at all the cracked passwords and I try to compare them to other crack jobs I've run to see, okay, are there specific masks that I can create that will guess people's passwords for me without necessarily needing a word list, because people follow a pattern. That first character is always an upper. Last character is always a symbol. Majority of the word is a lowercase, right? You can create custom word lists, not word lists, but character sets to specify. So if you know that it's likely going to be leet speak, you can do a lowercase and digits, maybe a symbol, but you're increasing the time because you're increasing that character set. And you just throw those in there and then you can kind of pick up a lot of people's passwords. So this isn't magic, it's just research, examining, human behavior, understanding what people are likely to do. So a little psychology comes into play here, and then using that to help facilitate your cracking so that you can be as efficient as possible, right? That's what it boils down here. For instance, a standard pen test is, 2 weeks long. That's not a lot of time to crack. By the time you get the hashes that you want to crack, you're already a couple days in. So realistically, you have 5, maybe 8 days tops for any sort of cracking. Unless you're doing a long-term red team engagement, then obviously those windows are well extended, but not a big deal here. And then association mode. I don't use this mode very frequently because I never know what hashes or passwords are created on, but a great example of this is using bcrypt, right? Bcrypt is an extremely slow hash to crack, but if you know that all the passwords use a timestamp, like a Unix timestamp in the creation of these passwords, you can feed that in with the association mode and the time to crack is like a few minutes. So it's really useful, but you need to understand how they made those passwords with that data. So we don't typically crack those. We'll run them through, but we don't typically use association mode, and it's just like a job that runs in the background on like 2 GPUs and it just runs indefinitely to hopefully crack that and develop it for later. So again, this is the intro to password cracking, right? How many of you here play online multiplayer games or have in the past? You ever seen this in general chat? For those WoW players, I've definitely seen this in the Barons chat. It's absolutely hilarious. But yeah, brute force cracking is what everyone thinks when you first start password cracking. Then you do your dictionary attacks and your rule sets. And then, yeah, just social engineering is just the easiest way. You just ask somebody for a password to likely give it to you. So I have a nice little tool called Just Ask. So if you're on a box through a C2 or something, you just run a little C# code, and it puts a nice little pop-up on their page and asks them for their creds. Actually fished the head of red teaming for a very large CDN company in my career with a WebEx prompt on Mac. So dropped a nice little Mac through OSA script and JScript, and told him he needed to update WebEx live on a WebEx call, mind you, and said, hey, why don't you go put your admin creds in here? And he goes, oh shoot, hold on guys, I gotta update. And sure enough, got his creds and then used those to pivot around the CDN network, which was a zero trust network. So I used those to pull down his keychain, open his keychain, and then we extracted his device and user certs, which is what they relied on for their zero trust. So pretty hilarious. So password cracking can also be done via social engineering. It's never off the table. So again, general cracking methodology. This is how I approach pretty much every crack job that we have. Always start with a smaller word list. The more guesses you have, the longer it will take. Again, people are lazy. They will create terrible passwords when able. Nobody wants to write a 16 to 30 character password that they can't remember and have to go into LastPass every time to go get, and it's just a huge pain in the butt. Especially in corporate networks where LastPass or 1Password is not required, they're going to be as lazy as possible. So start with smaller word lists. This is especially true when you're using harder or more intensive crack modes. So your bcrypts, even Kerberos. Kerberos can be a little slower, but your fast algorithms like NTLM, MD5, SHA-1, not a super big deal, but again, you just want to be as efficient as possible. Every time it's cracking, I'm staring at it for the first like 5-10 minutes of the crack, looking to see if there's any good passwords coming out, right? If I see a lot of passwords that start with the word password, I'll kill the job and I'll run a brute force job with a mask, so it starts with password, and then I'll throw up to 5 characters after that of any character, because that runs in less than 10 minutes on our rig, and it's just a good way to dump a ton of passwords. Same thing if you identify just random patterns that appear over and over. Okay, all these passwords have 6 to 8 digits, and they either end in 3 characters or they end or begin with 2 to 3 characters of upper and lower, or symbols or whatever. You can create a quick little mask, run that again, and you can crack it. Had a client last year with my pen test business, cracked a couple of the passwords in 2 minutes, found a pattern that they were using, ran that pattern, made some slight modifications to use any characters, cracked 98% of their passwords in less than 10 minutes. Because they had a terrible password policy and they gave every user a patternized password. So again, people are lazy and follow patterns and things that are easily identifiable. So like if you're a blue teamer looking at attacker activity, we all do the same thing, right? We're gonna look at directories, we're gonna move around, look for things that we can abuse or leverage from the system to complete our goals. You can kind of do the same thing with passwords and password policies. So that's the examine your cracked passwords for patterns. Next, you want to increase the difficulty of your jobs. Start using larger word lists. Start using more complex rule sets. The most common rule set out there right now is one rule to rule them still. It is a Redux. It's about 52,000 rules. It takes the top 10 to 15% performing rules from a bunch of different well-known rule sets, combines them into one, and it's relatively efficient. But when you add that to a massive word list, it can take a day, 2 days, up to 3 days for a job to run, right? And as I said, we have a time-boxed assessment, so that might not be your best course of action. And then the other thing that I always recommend, and I see a lot of people not doing, is taking all those cracked passwords from their jobs during the assessment, parsing out those passwords, and then using that as the input list and running it through the most complex rule sets you have to generate additional passwords, right? Password history is a big thing. If you can grab that, go for it. You'll get historical. It'll kind of give you a little bit into that psychology, into how that person thinks, and you can kind of guess their passwords again. But my personal word lists and rule sets that I use in every job are here. I do love the standard RockU, mainly because it's just funny when I find people using passwords in RockU in 2024. That's hilarious to me. And it's just a relatively good rule set. It's about 135 megabytes in size, so it works really well with large rule sets. So things like one rule to rule them still, Super Unicorn, the Royce rule sets, because Royce is a Hashcat developer and he has some really good rule sets, but they are quite large. Hash Killer is a great one. The combined Cyclone hashes.org Hash Killer one is my go-to dictionary. I use that one first all the time. That actually was a recommendation from the Hashcat team themselves. They said, this is what we always start with, and we pair that with the Inside Pro Passwords Pro rule. So that came directly from Hashcat developers. They said that is the most efficient combination of word list and rule sets that they have identified to date on most GPU rigs. So shout out to Chicken Man for that one. I appreciate that. Sam's probably tired of hearing from me again. But this is where I start. It's not the end-all be-all, but all of these rule sets are either come with Hashcat. If it doesn't say included with Hashcat after it, you can find it on GitHub. Just quick searching. They're pretty easy to find because they are very popular. And then all these dictionaries you can get on the internet. WeakPass has all of these, and all those dictionaries are vetted. They also have tons of other lists of varying sizes from mini all the way up to extra large, like 130 gigs unpacked for one dictionary. Super inefficient, don't recommend it, but if you have nothing else and you've done everything else, yeah, go for it, run it. But it's pretty slow. Oh, too far. Lastly, another good thing to do is always generate your own word lists, right? I know that you do this for web app testing when you're trying to find some stuff that might be custom to the organization, but it also works really well for password cracking because you're going to find words or references that you didn't think of that were associated with a company that they actually use for passwords, but was found on their website. So you can use Cool. There are other options out there. Not really gonna go into all those, but the other good thing, and something I do pretty frequently just because I find it interesting, and they do a lot of really unique hash types, is there's an annual Crack Me If You Can competition. So Hashcat competes in it, John the Ripper competes in it, hashes.org competes in it, and it's like for bragging rights essentially, because mainly your cracking teams are the ones that win, right? So your Hashcats, your John the Rippers are the ones that usually do best, but the write-ups are really good for this because they talk about creating automation to generate words, and they start introducing really interesting word sets that you would not be able to crack with just dictionaries and rule sets, and even combining them. They add spaces in between words, and they're pairing entire phrases from source material, right? If you figure out the source material is Star Trek, it's probably a full phrase from Star Trek or Game of Thrones or whatever. I think they had Vogon poetry from Hitchhiker's Guide in either 2023 or 2022. But they knew the source material came from Hitchhiker's Guide, so they basically got a text copy of the book, converted that into a word list, and did some automation around word list creation with that, and they were able to crack those passwords. So you can always pick up good tips and tricks from them, for sure. Again, I keep talking about efficiency, right? We're always on a time crunch with this. So don't just throw Rock You 2021, right? It's a massive word list, like 90-something gigs, with the one rule word set. That's not efficient. It'll run for, I think on our 8 GPU rig, it runs for about 2.5 to 3 days. And it hits, I want to say like 25% and just face plants because the operations on the rules get complex and it just doesn't know how to do it with all those guesses. And then the speed drops to like 40,000 or 40K instead of, gigahertz. So don't recommend that. And then keep it simple, right? Anytime you crack passwords, put those in your own word list. So if you're a pen tester and you work multiple jobs, even if you work at the same job, take all those cracked passwords, make your own dictionary with those. People will reuse things, or they will take them, mutate them just slightly, and then boom, you're cracking those again. It also saves you a ton of time. So was playing around with this with the Have I Been Pwned word list. So if you want to do cracking on your own, just be forewarned, if you're doing it at your house, your room will get very hot, no matter how much AC you pump in it, unless you have an industrial AC somewhere that can like actually push, has some good CFM, but yeah, no, a standard AC does nothing for the room, so it gets super hot, and your power bill, my wife was pretty pissed when we got a $600 power bill one month, and I used, 3,000 or 3,500 kilowatts. So she wasn't too pleased with that, and I had to kind of cut down on some of the cracking activity, but it was just, I was running a bunch of test modes and doing efficiency checks, and yeah, so a couple things to keep in mind, but that hash list is free. He has it in NTLM, MD5, and SHA-1, I believe. it's massive. It's like 39, 40 gigs of hashes, just pure hashes, at least on the NTLM set. And if you run a crack job, even with RockU, it just scrolls forever. So you have to hit cancel, wait like 5 minutes for the terminal to eventually catch up. But another great way to generate a word list, because no one's done it yet and made it public. I know people who have done it, they just don't make it public because they took the time to crack it. So we're going to jump into a couple attack mode examples here. The big thing I did with this is I stuck with the RockU dictionary for, I want to say, 90% of it, just to prove a point that you can use RockU to crack a ton of passwords. So like using just RockU alone, can we see it? Yeah, we can, sweet. I modified these slides earlier because I was at a talk and I noticed the nice little video of the speaker was kind of down in that bottom right corner, so I shifted my stuff up. I'm not a graphic designer, please don't judge me on that. I just wanted y'all to be able to see this. So just with RockU here on this data set, this is a corp data set with 6,900 hashes. We got 300 passwords just from RockU. So laughed pretty hard at that one. Again, this is just using that A0 mode, but we're not feeding it a rule set yet. So this is just checking what passwords are in the list that we specified. Never really going to be efficient, but it's always a good check because it's funny. And you can be like, ha, dummy. Like right here, I think we have hello123. Yeah, great password. I mean, password one, again, I literally just cracked that for a DA. Who would use that? I mean, somebody clearly used it, but you can then, this is primarily what you're gonna, I would say use most when you're doing this. You're gonna use that A0 mode, but with a rule set, right? So here, I just gave it the one rule to rule them still. And here you can see, now you're getting a little more complex passwords here. And we got an additional 2,700 hashes just by adding a rule set. So that put us upwards of over 3,000, right? 43% crack. This didn't take super long to run. Total time between these two jobs, I want to say is 2 minutes. And we just cracked 43% of an organization's user and service account passwords. Guaranteed there's an admin in there or someone that has excessive permissions that you could then leverage to do other things. We were already DA at this point, so it didn't matter. But just goes to show that adding rules makes things complex. There is one setback to rules. Currently, there are no public rule sets that are updated for 2023 and beyond. So typically you see users adding 2023, exclamation point, 2024, right? Those haven't really been added to rule sets, so you have to make your own for that. We're trying to put something together so we can get that out there and try to update some of these, but that it's very manual and slow going. I don't know if anybody makes Hashcat rules, but it is, the syntax is a pain in the butt and not super easy to automate for what you want to do. Trying to work on a tool for it to make our life easier, but not super easy. So you will have to create custom rules at some point to add various checks for, you know, modified years. Like I just made one, it was 1,000 rules and it covered 2023 all the way to 2035 plus some other rules in there. And I think I ran it through an older rule set or one of these crack jobs and I got an extra like 900 passwords just from doing that. So you can get it with other modes, but rule sets are going to be pretty quick. One thing that I learned and I had no idea was you could stack rule sets. So what is rule stacking? Rule stacking just means you can feed in Hashcat multiple rule sets and it will say, okay, take rule set one, apply for rule one and rule set one, apply all these additional rules to that guess. And you're creating all these extra unique guesses. This is extremely fruitful. However, it does rely on the virtual RAM of your GPUs. So you can't use like one rule and one rule on itself to make crazy guesses. You don't have enough memory for that. I think that alone is like, you need like 80 to 90 gigs of virtual memory for that. So it just does not work. So you want to use small to medium rule sets for rule stacking. I like to do like Best 64 and Inside Pro, mix and match, and the order does matter because it's how the guesses are translated. So if you do best 64 and inside pro, flip it around and do inside pro and best 64, you'll generate completely different guesses and crack a ton more passwords. This, in the past year, has been very fruitful. So this is definitely something to do. I would not start with it. I would start with your traditional rule sets first, and then go into the rule stack. And again, if you identify passwords, stop what you're doing. Go crack those patterns. You'll get it done more, and you'll laugh. Again, it's all about having fun, right? As a pen tester, we like to win, and we also like to have fun, you know? It's the little things in life. Sometimes I want to change people's background. I can't because that would leave a bad impression as the company. You know, we want them to hire us again. As much as we want to change their background to something great, can't. You always find really great passwords in here too when you're cracking, like some really good ones. Most of them, I know what you're all laughing at. I know which one. But you find some good ones. You see a lot of, I hate this place, F this job, my boss sucks, all sorts of variations about that, right? Because you can tell people are disgruntled about work, but they're like, well, shoot, I need this job, man. I can't quit, but I'm gonna take my frustration out with my password. Ooh, every time I type it, it's gonna make me feel good. So here, to generate this one, I used the combination attack, and I just appended rock you with itself. This is not the most efficient crack type, so I don't recommend running it towards the beginning. This is something you do after you've run all your more efficient jobs, because you can find some unique stuff. But yeah, this one, man, it doesn't say. I think this one ran for, this was an hour with just rock you on itself. But again, we only got 20 hashes, probably not the best for us. But it's worth trying towards the end of your crack cycle, because you can find other things. Now this is the bread and butter here, right? A6, A7. I always start with A6 just because I like to append, not prepend. And in this scenario, we got an extra 67 hashes, and it ran for a minute. Really cool thing you can do with this, you can also add increment flag, and it will go. So if I did 3 A's, or 3 1s here I did, yeah, which is just lower digit symbol in this example, it'll iterate that. It'll append 1 character, run that crack job, then it'll go to 2 characters, run that crack job, go to 3 characters. So it's really good. You really, especially with people with numbers and symbols, man, always put them at the end of their password. You crack so much extra stuff this way. Just a little rule set here. You can see it didn't do us that well. This mode does not support rules. So you cannot feed it a rule set like one rule or whatever. It does not support that. There are ways around it, which I'll talk about later. A7, same thing here. We're just prepending. Grabbed an extra 16 hashes on the data set. Typically, if you're going to do it and you're not going to run all characters, you want to do upper, lower, symbol are usually the most common at the start of a password. And now, please pray for me. We're going to see what happens. We're going to do it live. We're going to do it live. I hope it works. So this is just a simple brute force attack, right? We're going from 3 to 5 characters. I made a test hash list just so you guys kind of see it. Please work. Okay, sweet. So this is on my M1 Mac. It's not the fastest. But you can see we're getting passwords that I had written just for this test. I do have a corp data set, but they do not have terrible passwords like this. So it's just a quick little thing there. And where's my mouse? Get out of here. Found it. All right. Yeah, sweet. Oh, ignore that. That was my backup plan in case it failed. So is there any significance to these passwords on the screen? Yeah, they have numbers at the end. And sorry, it's super blurry. I tried that screenshot like 6 times and it's still super blurry. But yeah, you're right. So there's a bunch of numbers at the end, and you can see there's 2 to 3 characters at the start of it. It's a common pattern. That's what I'm talking about when you're cracking and you see things like that. It's always good note to write those down or copy them out into a notepad. I usually do that. I have a running list, and I just start making masks. So they're common combinations that we can then run through that brute force crack mode to get a bunch of passwords. So this is how I got 90+% on that one client in 10 minutes, is finding things like this that you just go, oh, that kind of looks like a start date for the employee. Oh, that might be their first initials, or first initial last name or something, right? And it's wild. So with that, we can create masks. Forgot about the video on this one, but this is like what a traditional mask looks like, right? So we did all the A's, which is every character, upper, lower digit symbol. This we're saying, hey, start with an upper, then do a lower, follow that by 6 to 8 digits, and it will try every combination of that. So let's see. We're gonna try it again. We're gonna try it again. I'm just gonna get it ready over here first since I can't see behind me. All right, so I put these in a mask file already. So we got crack type. I'm just doing a pot file path because I don't want it to overwrite my good pot file. Not that I have one on here. Hash list, we're doing A3, so instead of feeding it those masks one by one, you can put them in a file. It can be a text file. I do HC mask because that's what Hashcat does. Hashcat mask file is what it stands for. And then you just run it, and it will iterate over each mask in that file and attempt to crack. So right there, we got three of the hashes out of the 20-something or 30 in my pot file, and then it moves on to the next one, which I know there's none, so I'm just gonna go ahead and skip it for brevity. And then it moves on to the third attempt. So you can see guess queue here, tells you what mask it's on, and then above it shows you what mask we're running. And then we can see it's 2 hours long, because again, this is my MacBook. It's not a GPU crack, you know? But look, we can go ahead and we can still get a hash out of it, right? This actually works really well on corp data sets. So I've been compiling these for months and months and months. Have a really nice mask list. Does run for several days, unfortunately. But you know, I'll throw it on like 4 GPUs and just let it do its thing. And it ends up cracking me a ton of hashes. So all in all, masks are the way to go, but it does require you to analyze those cracked passwords, develop what masks, and then you got to test them with your specific hardware, and then go, okay, how long is this hash run for? Oh, this runs for 5 minutes. Okay, let me log that. So I've been making a spreadsheet. I need to find a better way to do it, but a spreadsheet that shows this mask runs for this long on 8 GPUs, just so I have like a base timeline, and then can be like, okay, maybe I'll skip that one today, whatever, because it runs long. And then I actually have them in order by time, because a lot of them just crack in 5 minutes or less, and they net us a ton of stuff. Ignore that. That's me being cautious. Again, take those cracked passwords you had, put them in a word list, run them through with rule sets. You'll crack additional passwords. So like here, I saw good for you in one of the other slides. This one found good for you, a bunch of numbers, extra symbols, right? Because it's applying all those extra rules. Sometimes you'll get things that say $ hex bracket and then hex code. You will have to convert those. Typically it's because they have symbols that will break parsing tools. So things like semicolons, colons, a couple other symbols like that will go ahead and break tools. So Hashcat just puts it in hex mode, calls out that it's hex, and you have to manually convert that or have a script that does it. There are some of those out there. Now, as I mentioned, some of these these modes do not accept rule files, right? So A1, A6, A7, and brute force modes do not allow you to specify rules. One thing you can do is feed Hashcat into itself and read from the standard in and apply rule sets on the second instance of Hashcat. So take the first Hashcat, right, which we can see here. D just means what devices am I using? I'm using all 8 right here. We're doing A1, so we're taking RockU, we're comparing RockU with itself, writing all those guesses to standard out, piping that into another instance of Hashcat, pointing it at our hash file, and then giving it a rule file. Downside to this, it adds a lot of time to your cracking, so do this towards the end of your crack cycles. And you get no notification on how long this will run for, because Hashcat has no clue. It has no idea how big that list is coming from the first instance of Hashcat. So it's like, yeah, it'll be done, sure. So in this scenario, I ran this thing for 4 hours and I got 2 extra hashes, right? But it found waters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6%, when it otherwise might not have. Could have found that with a rule set and some other stuff, but this is just to show you that this is possible. Again, you can do it with A6 and A7, or even brute force. Again, very, very slow, runs forever. This one I ran for almost 3 days straight. What did I get? 81 hashes cracked, right? But it was just interesting because I'm getting, things with extra symbols that I probably would not have guessed. And then you got like Blue Horse Pen. That's someone trying to follow XKCD's Battery Horse Staple. But yeah, it's cool. This was a nice shout out from the Hashcat team there for showing me that you can actually feed through standard in, or standard out into standard in, but also really useful for generating your own lists if you need them for various things, like password spraying. If you have a list of surnames, really great way to do some simple stuff without having to write Python code. Just saves time. That's what we're all about here. So again, special thanks to Hashcat team. We got Adam for creating it, Chicken Man for being my sounding board every other day, and just generally being a good dude and sharing knowledge, because he wants to see the cracking community get bigger, see more people participate in Crack Me If You Can, and if people can, if you're good at coding, definitely always looking for more people to help fix some of the hash modes, implement new hash modes. I'm still fighting with them to get them to add PFX support, because right now the only tool that does it is Jon the Ripper to crack a PFX certificate. So when you find a nice PFX in a share that's password protected and you don't crack it right away, it's pretty slow on Jon the Ripper. But again, thanks to Jon the Ripper for maintaining all these wonderful tools for zip to Jon, PFX to Jon, so on and so forth. So I'll open it up for Q&A if anybody has any. Yes, right here in the green.
So I have a bunch of questions, but the biggest one is, when you present this to a pen test client, and they say, okay, great, what should I do? And you tell them, make your password rules or something. And they're like, cool, we did that. I thought it was strong. A bunch of the passwords you cracked look strong, right? Uppercase, lowercase, etc. Like, is this a lost battle? Like, what are the companies supposed to do?
No, actually, that's a great question. I had a client recently that actually had a very robust password list. We cracked less than 20% of their passwords. Big thing is Microsoft, Entra, Azure, whatever you want to call it, released a password auditing tool that you can deploy both either on-prem or in the cloud, where you can put an allow list or a block list. So you can block list seasons, company name, sports teams, locations of businesses, and that's been extremely helpful. So we always recommend that they implement something like that so that users can't make terrible passwords and they get denied by that tool. So that's probably the biggest change they can make. And then other than that, it's really just educating users, which is extremely difficult. Yes. All right. Blue shirt. I have in recent months seen regional winning out. Mainly people are, and I'm gonna, if anyone's from Texas, I'm sorry, but Texas is the worst about it because they always put Texas, Dallas, Houston, and then they put all their sports teams, Cowboys, Rockets, whatever, every single time. And you crack so many passwords because they always do things that are local to that region. But other clients, like I've done banking clients, and they traditionally are a bit more secure, and they force them to use and get out of those habits and use stronger passwords. Yes, right here in the black.
Out of curiosity, from the sounds of it, sounds like you guys are using one box. Have you sort of experimented with tools like Hashtopless or something like that to like distribute workloads across them, or is most of your stuff smaller scale? Because I know some of your recommendations were keep it small to start with and then get bigger. I'm guessing
Hashtopless is a great. Hashtopless is a great solution. We're not using it currently because our box is Windows-based because they decided to build a Windows box for some reason. That was not my choice. But Hashtopless is great. I highly recommend it if you can distribute that workload. And yeah, so running out of time here. Definitely available after this. If you have questions, just come find me. I'll be up walking around. Definitely open to talk. But thank you all for coming. I appreciate it. And as Michael Scott says, we'll catch you on the flippity flip.